so very easy. My name is Laura, and this quilt is mainly one quilt block. And it can be put together in two different ways. It can be sewn horizontally, and it can be sewn vertically. The free pattern shows you horizontal. I'm going to show you vertical. The fabric is from RJR. It is called June's Cottage, and it really does have that spring cottage feeling. And I have 26 different fabrics that I'm going to be using. Now you can always use charm packs, which are 5 inches. There is a free pattern that goes with this fabric line, and it's called Dapper. And it looks like all these little bow ties. All of it is straight pieced. The pattern comes with a template page, and even though it's a template, there's still straight seams. There's a couple of ways you can use these. You can print them on paper, pin them on the fabric and cut them, or make a template and use the template to trace. I'm going to use the template. And for now, I'm only going to use the big part, A. All of my 5-inch strips are going to be cut with this template shape. From each of your fabrics, you're going to need the width of the fabric cut at 5 inches. If you want to make a larger quilt, you will need 2 strips. You can leave the fabric folded in half. Take your template and trace. Use anything that you can see on the fabric because this is a cutting line, so it's not going to affect any of the sewing. Take that template piece and just turn it. The edges will match up and draw the next line. Turn and trace. You're going to do this right to the end. The corner of the template has been cut off. If that line was to continue to go straight, you would have this little point there. You are still going to be able to rotary cut this. As I trace this template, I'm going to be able to draw those little notches and then draw that line straight up. When I turn it, the top is going to be straight, so I can just continue to draw that line. The edges will match up perfect. You will be able to trace 5 of those templates on this long strip. You'll have a little piece on the end along that fold. So you will have 10 of these shapes from each strip. I will be able to put the edge of my ruler right along that drawn edge and cut all the lines. I have 5 of these pieces, the selvage cut off, and that folded end. From the folded piece, I can cut B and C. I can cut off those little notches on the end. Take one piece at a time, cut the one end, cut the second, and just continue through your stack. Because you already marked it, the little tip marks are easy to cut off. Just stack them in a pile. And even though you cut them folded, they're still going to match fine. If you were going to cut these from a charm pack, they're 5-inch squares, you'd be tracing the 2 lines down, and you'd be discarding these corner pieces. When you're done, you're going to have all the same shape out of all of your fabrics. Let's take a close look at the pattern. 2 of these fabrics are going to match together, and that is what gives it this bow tie look. So each one is matched. However, we're not sewing the match together first. We're going to sew the match together after. We need to sew these in long rows. So each one of these are long rows, and the bow ties are sewn together. It's a straight seam, but it looks like it's on an angle. I'm going to lay out a couple so you can see how this goes. We have the one bow tie, so this will be 2 separate rows. This next bow tie is not going to be in the same row. It's going to be part of one and the next. So it'll be on this side and that side. So I will have a second bow tie, this row to this row. But they're still going to be sewn in rows, and then afterwards when those rows are sewn together, the patterns will match up. Because you want your patterns to match up, it's really good if you use a design wall or lay them on the floor so you have an arrangement that you like. Then you can sew each row at a time. As I fill in the blanks, it's going to start a new row, but I still have complete bow ties. By laying them out first, you'll be able to see if you like how the placement looks, but it also gives you a better sense of how you're going to be able to sew it. Each of these blocks will be sewn together first, then the long rows will be put together, so you're not sewing this type of a shape. When you come to one end, you'll be able to take half a bow tie away. You will have two straight corners on each side, and in the top, this is where the A and the C pieces come in. They're very close to being half of that shape in order for that spot to be filled. So you can either place that piece and trim it off or use the templates. I'm just going to trim them down. I'm going to match up the pieces on what I'm calling the bottom, which is closest to me. These two pieces are going to go together. So I'll flip those two together. The next, flip together. The next, flip together. And because I have an odd number, this is going to be last. Just continue stacking them right on top of each other. Now I'll take the stack to the machine and sew all the seams together. This little point that was cut off of each of the pieces is going to help you match as you stitch. Here is that point cut off. When you match up, you're going to be able to take this point and match it right to the bottom. So you're going to have this little triangular shape sticking out. You're going to have that on both sides. When you stitch, your line, your 1/4 inch is going to be able to start right here and go all the way up. And it's going to look the same on the reverse. And by starting right there at that point with that little triangle hanging over, you're going to have a perfect match edge. So when this is opened up, you can see that this is a straight edge and you have no dog ears pointing out. I'm going to take this first one and move it to the side, and I have the seams here that need to be sewn. I could take this first one and stitch this seam here because I have it matched up. I like to start with a piece of fabric, and you can see I've been stitching on this a lot. That just prevents any chance of my thread going underneath my machine and causing a bird nest, but it's also just easier to go. I don't have those long threads I need to hold. I just can hold this piece of fabric. And I'm going to stitch coming right off. Slide this right under the foot and start stitching down. So I'm just going to continue stitching. I'm not going to cut the threads. Just going to pick up the next piece and I can bring it right to the machine. Right here, I'm going to match up those points in that 1/4 inch seam, slide it right under the foot and continue. I don't have to worry about holding that long tail of thread as I stitch. And I'm going to be able to continue stitching. Now my next piece, I'm going to bring it back over and continue stitching. When I come off my last piece of fabric, I'm going to pick up a scrap piece and stitch right over top. Now I can trim this apart. I'm going to keep them in order and restack them so that the bottom one stays on the bottom and I lift to the top. Trim off that top piece. Now I have all of the pieces still in order. I can take this top piece, I'm going to open it up. The next piece, open it up, and I know those seams need to be stitched together. Bring it to the machine and stitch. Just take the next two and put them together. By keeping them in order, this is going to save you having to go back and forth and matching up the seams. And this was the last piece. So when I open them up, all of those seams are sewn together. When you're done this whole strip, you're going to be able to just lay this right where you took it from, and you'll be able to pick up your next stack and bring it and sew them. Here's the one row stitched together, then the second. These small seams are going to match. You can see where this seam here is not going to make the bow tie. Neither are these. But when I'm cut, it's just going to give me a solid colored piece. Continue the bow tie theme or have it look solid. On this side, I'm going to have it solid looking. On this side, it will look like the bow tie. You'll be able to see the difference. I'm going to leave them in order and then take one stack to the machine, bring it back, take the next stack, bring it back, and continue with each row. We have all the rows done. Now we need to iron. We want the seams to nestle together. So there's two ways you can press them. You can press the two seams going out, which means these two are going to go in, or you do one row going in one direction and one row going in the opposite direction. Now when I go to match up these rows, the seams are going in opposite directions, so they're going to nestle together. It's a nice straight row to stitch, and we just need to stitch all of those rows together. Once the rows are put together, you can really see the bow ties. And you can really notice that the ends are not bow ties compared to this side. I would call this more of a lantern shape. This is how you would put together the entire thing. Doesn't matter how many rows you have or how many blocks coming this way. Just start and stack them and then stitch them all together. If you used your B and C templates, you won't need to trim off these edges. If you're going to use the solid pieces, you will need to trim that down. Here is the bow tie side and the lantern looking side. And sewing this together horizontally is very similar. You're still going to sew those two seams together, but instead of coming down in a row, you're going to stitch them going across. Then you will do your long vertical rows and it goes together. Pattern has great directions. One simple block, two different ways to put it together. If you're to put this on the side, those bow ties would turn into hourglasses. And if you do it all scrappy where you don't worry about any matching at all, this would turn into a thimble. It looks beautiful in the RJR fabric, but it also would be a great scrap buster. Thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe, and as always, come on back. Let's see what we're sewing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.